Review Committee together. It's Monday, February 22nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. and it's via teleconference. As chairman of the Budget Review Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to the executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting via telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099. The meeting ID is 881-9486-9249, and the passcode is 490575. The public may also view the meeting via channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at www.nashua.nh.gov and publicly noticed at the City Hall and Nashua Public Library. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you get connected. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods that have been mentioned, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes are taken during the meeting will be done by roll call. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Alderman O'Brien, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clerk, Michael O'Brien, is present. I am alone. Alderman at Large, Laurie Wilshire.
I'm here, I'm alone, and I can hear everyone.
Alderman Ernest Jetty.
I'm here alone and I can hear the proceedings.
Alderman Jan Schmidt.
Present, alone, and can hear everyone.
Alderman at Large, Ben Clemens.
I am here, I'm by myself, and I can hear everyone.
The chair, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Yes, I'm present. I can hear everyone, and I am alone.
Okay, also in attendance, I have Alderman Lou and Alderman Harriet Gathright. Also in attendance, Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, Deputy Police Chief Kevin Rourke, CFO John Griffin, and Kim Kleiner, and anybody else of note that wants to be recorded.
Camille
Yes,
Patterson,
Oh, yes,
Transit.
Camille Patterson.
okay. All right. Also, Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly is not with us this evening. She has a reason for not being here. Okay. So the first item of business is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to give us any testimony on something that's coming before the Budget Committee this evening? Seeing and hearing no one. Communications.
From Sarah Marchant, Community Development Division Director. The reason is Transportation Department request for reduction of revenue contracts.
There being no objections, I'll waive the reading and place it on file. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-21-115, approving the cost items of a sidebar agreement between the National Police Commission and the National Police Patrolmen's Association and the National Police Commission and the National Police Supervisors Association regarding military leaves of absence. Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
Deputy Chief O'Rourke.
do you want a motion?
Oh,
First?
yes. Go ahead, do the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 21-115. Deputy Chief O'Rourke. Rourke,
Good evening. It's Rourke.
I keep trying to make you more Irish.
I know. Just a pretty straightforward policy. We just realized that nothing was in place here to cover long-term leave. I appreciate your support for this. If you have any questions, I'll answer them, but pretty standard policy that many unions in the city have and businesses outside.
Anyone have any questions?
I have one question.
Yes, Alderwoman Gottlieb.
Deputy Chief, what was the process before this?
There was a city policy back, from what I understand, a while ago that was very similar to this. I had talked to a couple guys that used to use that policy, and it was no longer in effect for the city. When we went to look for a long-term policy, we were advised that that policy was outdated and it was not used anymore. We haven't had anybody really leave on long-term leave like this in quite some years, so that's when we noticed it.
Okay, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think there's been a lot more call up of National Guard lately that prompted some of the concern in case that happened. Any other questions for the Deputy Chief? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much as a question for Chief Rourke, but excuse me. Unfortunately, I know the policy, being a 35-year employee, that's the way it used to be, and then past administrations had changed it. But this is across the board. It seems like it doesn't exist. So I think this is the beginning. We're very fortunate, I think, to have policemen and firefighters that do a little bit extra and get called up to active duty. And I think I would hope that we would equally hear from the firefighters that I think that this could possibly help them equally as well.
I think the firefighters, Deputy, you can chime in. I think the firefighters already have this.
They do.
They have it in their contract.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Any other questions? Any other questions? No? All right. With the motion on the floor is for final passage of R 21-115, approving the cost items of a sidebar agreement between the National Police Commission, the National Police Patrolmen Association, and the National Police Commission of the National Police and the National Police Supervisors Association regarding military leaves of absence. Would you, Clerk, please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that's 6 yeas, 0 nays.
The motion passes and will be recommended to the full board for passage. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R-21-116, establishing an expendable trust fund for appropriations for the Business and Industrial Development Authority. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Motion on the floor is for recommend final passage to the full board on R 21-116. Is there anyone here to speak to it? No. Alderman Schmidt?
I thought perhaps Director Cummings would like to say something on this.
I didn't see him madly waving his hand.
He's
Okay,
waving.
Director Cummings.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Alderwoman Schmidt. Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, for the record. This legislation is somewhat housekeeping in nature. The BIDA, the Business Industrial Development Authority, which was established quite a ways back, particularly to redevelop a certain area of the city over by the Merrimack River on the Hudson line, has done so. And now we're at a point where they're contemplating other projects, and the thought process being is it would be good to give them a small little kitty based off of their work to be able to continue to improve underperforming assets, and hopefully try to get them into their highest and best use, which will yield the city the highest tax revenue. So this is just something that's a little bit organizational in nature that would set aside a small account for them, and as appropriate, which this language doesn't necessarily get into, but as projects move forward and this body decides to appropriate money into that account, there would be a segregated separate usage of funds for the purposes as I described.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Cummings. Are there any questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of providing some money to the Business and Industrial Development Authority, if they need that to develop property in the city that they could need, that needs development, that needs rehabilitation or whatever. What I'm against is taking money from this project in order to fund this. I think if it is true that the Business and Industrial Development Authority needs this sum of money to get started on developing projects, then I think the mayor ought to propose that as part of his budget for next year, and we can weigh it, the need for the Business Industrial Development Authority to have this money as opposed to other needs of the city, and determine how much that should be, whether they should get anything, and if so, how much. And it ought to be part of the budgeting process. What this does is it takes this Bridge Street project. If I could, if you indulge me, if I could recap a little bit, this Bridge Street project was part of the the Renaissance property development, and included a lot on Bridge Street, on the corner of Bridge Street and Sanders Street, to be developed into a recreational lot, whether it was a soccer field or some other, that other game that is like soccer, but a little different, for whatever purpose it might have been put. The idea was to provide a recreational area in that section of the city, and because I think because the developer was not able to acquire property that he thought he was going to be able to acquire from another landowner, the viability of the project was, as I understand it, was threatened, and he needed to be able to. It needed to be able to develop more property in order to make the thing viable, and I think Director Cummings and the Business and Industrial Development Authority, came up with a plan with the developer to allow the developer to develop this lot on Bridge Street, which was supposed to be for recreational purposes. There was an agreement made that the developer could purchase that lot and develop it in order to make his broader project more economically viable. In exchange for for that. The developer agreed to pay the city $750,000 for the purpose of acquiring some other property, either in this part of the city or in some other part of the city for, recreational purposes, for another athletic field or some other recreational purpose. So, I think there are two different issues here. One issue is, does the Business Industrial Development Authority need this money? I think that's one issue. I don't disagree that that an argument can be made that they do. But the other issue is, this $750,000 is supposed to be used for recreational purposes, and I would rather that the idea of funding the Business and Industrial Development Authority, be weighed on its own merit, and if they need money, then we ought come up with a way of providing them that money through in the budget. This $750,000, however, should remain for the purpose of providing recreational facilities, ideally in that area of the city. I don't know what the status. I've heard that that some of the projects that were slated for this area of the city, the so-called railroad rail yard development area, that those, last I heard, those projects were on hold. But if those projects get developed, there's going to be, as we've heard before, several, many new dwelling units, which bring with them people, and who we should provide recreational opportunities to. And I know there's an area along the river that a lot of people would like to see developed, to take advantage of the frontage on the Merrimack River, so that people can enjoy the river in whatever ways. I mean, there are a lot of potential uses for this $750,000. So I'm when I first hear about this, I'm thinking we're mixing the two things, and we ought to keep the $750,000 for recreation, and if we need to provide funding for the development authority, then we ought to do that through the regular budgeting process. We got to come up with that money when we look at the budget, which we're going to be doing in a few months. That's my thinking, and I'm wondering, I'd like to give Director Cummings an opportunity to to comment on what I've said, and whether he has a rebuttal to what I've said, or finds any agreement at all with what I've said.
I'm going to give it back to Director Cummings in a second, but as I read the legislation, it appears that there's $250,000 left over from some expenditure. And so that we don't lose the $250,000, we're putting it in an expendable trust fund, which is established as stated in the legislation. Anything that's in an expendable trust fund to be spent has to come back to the Board of Aldermen for a vote on what it's being spent for. And Tim, you want to elaborate more on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple clarifications. The 250,000 figure is up over and above what was set aside for the payment in lieu of providing that quote unquote rectangular athletic field. There was a protracted negotiation between the developer and bidder that developed a formula that basically said after, and I don't have the exact specifics and all the numbers at my fingertips, it's in the folder in my office. But it basically says something like after a certain number of units, I'm going to say off the top of my head, 145, 142, 148 in that range, that for every 7,000, each unit that gets developed above that figure, they would be a $757,500 basically assessed on top of what the payment was to the city. And so the thought process being is that this would be the seed money that would help BIDA do another project in the future. And that's what this essentially tees up and what the BIDA is trying to endeavor to do.
But the expendable trust fund, Tim, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say isn't established yet, is a holding place for us to hold this money, so it can't be spent for anything else except whatever is in the guidelines of the expendable trust fund, and still has to come back to the Board of Aldermen for approval of any expenditure.
That's absolutely 100% correct.
Does that make it a little clearer, Alderman Jenny?
So I'm looking at the resolution regarding Bridge Street. It's 775,000, not 750. As I said previously, it requires a payment of 775,000 to the city in lieu of a rectangular athletic field. And then it says provides for $7,500 for each residential unit over 147 units, which is approved by the planning board. So,
But
I don't understand, Director Cummings, is this the 250,000? Why is this the 250,000 that you're asking for the Business and Industrial Development Authority? Why is it tied into this project? And are you saying that however it's tied, that the 775,000 is separate, that the 775,000 is somehow preserved for recreational purposes and is not part of this 250,000?
Director Cummings?
Thank you. I'm going to double check what I'm saying to you, but yes, I need to double check what I'm saying, but I don't know what the exact unit count is that has been approved by the planning board or will be approved by the planning board. I should say for the record, I'm not 100% sure it's been approved yet, but whatever that unit count is above the 147, and my last recollection, it was somewhere around 165-ish. Is what I heard. I haven't seen that. Is essentially, where we're gonna be for the differential. Something to that effect.
So, but this legislation before us, 116, is saying that somehow out of that other legislation, there's going to be a potential of $250,000 extra that we don't know how we're going to allocate it yet. So we're putting it in expendable trust to protect it from being spent on something else. And it can only be spent with a vote of the Board of Aldermen. So I'm not sure how that impacts the 750,000 from before. That's a separate item that's not addressed specifically in this legislation.
That would just right now accrue to the general fund.
Right.
So may I follow up?
Sure. Alderman Jettie?
So when you say it's not addressed in this legislation, I bow to your experience and expertise in this area, but when I look at the legislation, it
Are you referencing R19-148?
I'm looking at the resolution before us, R21-116.
Right. And I don't see 750 mentioned anywhere in that legislation, at least the copy I have.
No, it doesn't mention that, but what it does say is it is the intention of this board that after closing, $250,000 from the sale of land on Bridge Street and Sanders Street, CR 19-148, will be appropriated into this expendable trust fund via a supplemental appropriation resolution. So it's saying that from the sale of that property on Bridge Street, $250,000 is going to be taken and put into this expendable trust fund. Now, where that $250,000 is going to come from, it doesn't say. But if it, part of what's going to be paid is the $775,000.
I've got Alderman Lou and Alderman Clements in the queue, but Mr. Griffin would like to chime in. Mr. Griffin?
Yes, John Griffin, CFO for the record. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and members of the committee. As Alderman Jettie just read, the $250,000 doesn't go in there with this resolution. It contemplates a vote of the board through a supplemental appropriation at an appropriate time when that number is probably more certain, the 250 going in. It was just an added piece of this legislation to explain the types of revenues that could be supplementally appropriated into this particular expendable trust fund. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, once it gets into the expendable trust fund, it doesn't lapse to surplus, so it can be spent under the Board of Aldermen and probably the mayor and the economic development director. Thank you.
Okay, you all said Alderman Jettie, or shall I get other questions?
No, I think that my point is that I don't see the need to tie these two things together. If we think that the Business and Industrial Development Authority should get $250,000 to do their work, then we ought to put that in part of next year's budget and figure out how to come up with that money. To tie it into this project, I don't see why. I think you're combining two separate items, and I would want to make it clear that the $775,000 that the developer is paying the city in lieu of the athletic field, remain for a recreational purpose, and I don't want to see anything that threatens that.
Yeah, I don't see anything in this legislation that threatens that, and as Mr. Griffin just said, the $250,000 is like a holding place. The basic form of this legislation is to develop an expendable trust fund, which doesn't exist yet, would exist after the Board of Aldermen approves this legislation, that if there is funds left over from the sale and acquisition, that this is a place that the money could be placed. Again, if I'm hearing right from Mr. Griffin, it would take another move of the Board of Aldermen to put the money into the expendable trust. But we have to establish the expendable trust to safeguard the money from being spent on anything else that's not covered by the expendable trust. And I got multiple people with their hands up. Mr. Cummings wants to again.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to explain the rationale, it would be my counsel to the city of Nashua and to BIDA to only use the proceeds that would actually come from a transaction. That way you are not affecting the property tax base. And so the logic being so that BIDA, being self-sufficient, would only use, in theory, and I would even argue an apportionment, maybe not all, a percentage of its proceeds that it gained from pursuing and moving certain projects forward. That would be the reason why. So therefore, it's not part of any theory or any connectivity to a property tax type of mechanism.
Alderman Jettie, I'll come back to you, but I got a couple other aldermen that would like to.
Of course. Thank you.
Alderman Lou?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question through you to Director Cummings is, what has BIDA done in the past? They've made progress on a couple of projects over the years. And in the past, how did they fund whatever activities it is that they could use funding for? And in addition to that, rather than call it a kitty, is it possible that you could just describe what going forward, what types of things they need funding for?
Director
Certainly.
Cummings?
Yes, thank you. So there was a couple questions in there. I apologize if I don't get them all. First, the BIDA has never had any real funding associated to it. I believe probably over time, they've had certain type of appropriations as necessary to do various studies and whatnot. But they haven't necessarily had any opportunity to really create their own revenue source, if you will, because this Renaissance project is the sole project that they've been working on. They've been working on it since like 2008. They successfully brought phase 1 of the project through. That's the 152 units that were recently built. They're now in phase 2. They have phase 2 under agreement, and it's hopefully slated to close sometime, probably early summer, which would wrap up this area. And then they would be looking to, apply their expertise and their mission to other areas of the city. And to answer the last question, it's to redevelop underperforming land in the city. That is what BIDA was created to do. They were charged with this area on the east side of the city. And then I fully suspect that they would be looking to do something similar. I can't speak to the size or scale, but something of the similar nature where they would take an underperforming piece of land, an asset, and try to create some value on it so the city can yield the tax revenue.
Any further questions?
Yeah, just a clarification. Thank you. What I was trying to understand is what expenses are they needing the money for?
It could be a whole litany. I can't answer that per se, but it could be acquiring, it could be an option, it could be studies, it could be permitting, it could be technical expertise. Those are just some ideas off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment, just to the group, that I know the Conservation Commission came to us not long ago for an allocation for something, and it was nice that it was a specific. We knew what we were what they were asking for it for. And my concern is just, is this a time when we want to throw several $1,000s into a fund that just to be held for the future? I'm just wondering if we need these funds for 2022.
Director Cummings and
That's
then
all.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you.
The legislation before you references 162, RSA 162. And that, I'm just looking at it here. It's 162A, and in 162A, it's very prescribed as to what the mission of BIDA is. And that would be what the purpose of those funds would be used for.
Just to follow up, please.
Follow up?
Well, I understand the mission. I just don't understand what activities or what costs they incur. Apparently, there have been no cost until now.
I never said that. What I said was they received separate appropriations throughout the time,
You
and I
did say
can't
that.
speak to what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the good thing about this legislation that's before us is it doesn't appropriate any money. So it just creates the account to appropriate the money into it, we need to have a separate conversation about that in the future.
Yeah, so again, it has, the $250 is just a sort of a, I guess, or an earmark that might be over and above what they get from selling these units. But again, this legislation is to establish an expendable trust fund if the Board of Aldermen so decides to put the money aside to help in future endeavors along this line. The money could go into this expendable trust and be held there until the expenditure. But any monies that would go into this have to be again voted on under separate legislation by the Board of Aldermen. Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I want to make it clear, this resolution is tied to R19-148, which is the sale of this lot that I talked about on Bridge Street. The consideration, when you look at the purchase and sale agreement attached to the resolution, the price that the developer is paying, the developer is buying a lot of land that the city owns that was supposed to be developed as a recreational lot. The developer is agreeing to pay $775,000, and that money is in lieu of developing that lot as a recreational site. That was part of the original agreement. The developer was going to develop that lot for recreational purposes. So this new agreement is that we're going to allow him to buy that lot and build housing units on it. And he's going to pay, it is going to pay $775,000. There is no other money. So when you talk about $250,000 from the closing, the $250,000 is coming from that $775,000 that was supposed to be used for recreational purposes. There is the possibility if it gets approval for more than 147 units, that the developer will pay an additional, I think it's $7,500 per unit above that 147. But that's all speculation. What we're dealing with is just a total of $775,000. That's it. And if you take $250,000 from this closing, it's going to reduce that $775,000 by the $250,000. So what I'm saying is if the Business and Industrial Development Authority needs money to seed further activity, further development, then let's remove the connection to the sale of this lot, the proceeds of which is supposed to be used for recreation. Let's remove that part of it and just say, and I would prefer that the mayor just make this proposal as part of his budget, that the BIDA get funded $250,000 or whatever other amount is appropriate, and we debate whether or not that's necessary, and and whether or not that's an appropriate amount, whether it's too little, or whether it should be more, but not take it out of the $775,000, which is supposed to be used for recreation.
Alderman Clements?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Alderman Jettie. However, the legislation has to have an intent from where the money is going to come from. And the intent was to come from the excess of the units so in other words, you can't just create an expendable trust fund and not have a place from which to put the money. There has to be a source. And so this is kind of gray area because it says the intent of the source is going to be that account. However, it doesn't appropriate anything, and it also doesn't tie this board's hand to doing so either. We can change our minds after the fact if we want to. So essentially, this gets done what Alderman Jetty is asking for, in my opinion, which is to create the account and then at a later date debate the merits of where that money should come from. But you have to, in order to have that debate, you have to create the account first. I mean, I suppose we could wait until the money comes in from the sale, but I think I would venture to guess that we're close to that point. Is that correct, Mr. Cummings?
Director Cummings?
Yes, I believe we will see a closing sometime in the next 90 to 120 at the far outside, but probably within the next 90 days.
Okay, so again, this establishes the trust fund, does not put any money in it, does not guarantee that we're going to take money from that sale. If any money that gets put on that account would have to be voted by the Board of Aldermen and from its source and into this account. And then any monies put into this account would have to be approved by the Board of Aldermen to be spent. So, you know, but in order to establish the expendable trust, you have to have a potential from where the funds would be coming. In this case, there's some speculation that there'll be excess funds. And what they're saying is if the Board of Aldermen so determines by an additional vote later that those funds could be put in this expendable trust. Does that clarify things, Alderman Jetty?
Well, could I, through you, could I ask CEO Griffin, is that true? If we amended this to remove that second paragraph, to remove the reference to the 250,000 coming from the sale of this lot on Bridge Street, the idea of creating an expendable trust fund, would that fail? I mean, is that not possible? Do we have to identify the source of the funds at this point?
CFO
Mr.
Griffin?
Chairman, CFO Griffin, Mr. Chairman, as Alderman Clemens indicated, I've never seen the creation of a expendable trust fund without some kind of intent of trying to put money into such expendable trust fund. I don't believe that, as been stated, the 250,000 needs another legislative action to put in here. As Director Cummings and I spoke about this particular resolution, we both believe that setting up an expendable trust fund that could be used effectively in the future was the way to go, and that's why we put this in here. So I think, as Chairman Dowds indicated, there's a lot of safeguards in here that you're not appropriating money, and Alderman Clemens as well. You're not appropriating money tonight, and waiting. I think there's an intent here to maybe properly fund the Business and Industrial Development Authority. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with Deputy Corporation Counsel Clark if we take that paragraph out, that somehow it wouldn't be able to be approved. I think the risk is low. My preference would be to recommend, as Director Cummings, to keep it the way it is. Thank you.
My suggestion would be to pass the legislation as it's written tonight. If Attorney Clark comes back and says we don't need the second paragraph, then Alderman Jetty, you certainly could put a motion in at the full board meeting to remove that as an amendment to this motion.
Okay.
I believe the legislation that establishes expendable trust funds has to have in it, and this is what we'll ask Attorney Clark, You have to have a potential source. You just can't create ad nauseum expendable trust funds with no idea you're ever going to put money in it. You got to have some idea where the money might be coming from, but it still takes other action of the Board of Aldermen to put anything into it from anywhere. Alderman Jettie?
Yeah. This is my last word, I promise. I still think that, that the, identifying $250,000 coming from this closing, where there's no other money other than the $775,000 is taking away money from the purpose of that $775,000, which is to provide recreation, ideally for this area, but at least somewhere in the city. So I'm going to vote against this for that reason. I think if I don't think we ought to be establishing an expendable trust fund for the Business and Industrial Development Authority. At this point, we're about to be looking at the budget. The mayor is preparing his budget. If he thinks that money, there are a lot of demands on the city budget this year, and we've heard all kinds of stories about how the state is passing costs down to us. We're already talking about increases in the wastewater rates. Pennachuck is increasing its rates. We're talking about having to increase the tax rate again because of the expenses that the state is passing down to us. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're not sure what our revenues are going to be like. To allocate, to create an expendable trust fund, and I understand you're saying, well, the 250,000 isn't going to be put in there until we do something else. The fact that it appears in this resolution, I think is paving the way to take 250,000 from the 775,000 and give it to the Business and Industrial Development Authority, instead of the idea of funding the Business and Industrial Development Authority. That concept competing with the other needs of the city during the normal budget process. I think that's the way we ought to be approaching this, not, taking 250,000 out of the general fund for this purpose, without weighing it against all of the other needs of the city. So that's all I'll say. Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, I don't think I heard any time that we're taking 250,000 out of the general fund to fund this. Because for one thing, we have not taken any motions from about allocating funds to this from anywhere. That would be a separate item which would come before the board. But to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Cummings, this would only be money coming from a private entity that to the city that we would be putting in. Has nothing to do with the taxes at this point.
Correct.
So with that, if there aren't any other questions, I will have the clerk call the roll on this motion to recommend final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
No.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, 5 yeas, 1 nay.
motion carries. Okay. Next item, Alderman O'Brien, new business ordinances.
Before us this evening is ordinance -21-047, temporarily changing the downtown improvement funding plan. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
The motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of 021-047, temporarily changing the downtown improvements funding plan. Who is going to present? Alderman Clements?
Yes, thank you. So the reason that this is coming forward is because, as we know, last year we put the barriers up for the businesses downtown for the COVID-19 pandemic, which was very successful. However, that had the effect of taking away parking revenue from downtown. In addition to that, traffic was actually lighter downtown, especially in the months before we put the barriers up. And we lost quite a bit of parking revenue in those months as well. So traditionally, the way that we fund the Downtown Improvement Committee is that any revenue in excess of $728,000 is put into an expendable trust fund for the Downtown Improvement Committee. This year, and that's based on a calendar year basis. So that's from January, if we're looking back at last year, it's January 2020 to December 31st, 2020. So last year we ran short. It was about 665,000, I think, if I remember correctly. So what that means is that the typical appropriation that we would normally put into the Downtown Improvement Committee for the budget coming up, so for July 2021, we won't have that. So the flip side of that is that the Downtown Improvement Committee also saves some money by not having to do some of the things that normally we do. You know, some of the events and the festivals and things like that that normally go on as business was overall down, and you can't have big congregations and things like that. So the good news is that we should be okay going through for this year, particularly as things open up, and maybe, you know, we can have the holiday stroll this November. And I would imagine that with the way that businesses was down, I think the Downtown Improvement Committee might stand to be one of the places that GAD has to go for some of the funding for an event like that. So with all of that said, there's plenty of things on our horizon. However, we are intending to put the barriers back. So that was a successful program, and our restaurants benefited from it quite a bit. And it's going to run longer. So the intention is to run that from March to November. So we're going to lose that parking revenue again. So it's not exactly clear that it's going to come back to that traditional $728,000 that we've, you know, historically gotten for the last 2 decades. So what I have done, and I talked to the mayor about this, I've talked to several of the co-sponsors, is to come up with a plan that basically says we're going to take $100,000 of the parking revenue we get for this year, so calendar year 21, and appropriate that in the budget in July of 2022. That way, by the time we get to July of 2022, we'll have money to guarantee to put into that account like we normally do, because it roughly is about $100,000 that we get on an average basis for that. And then number 2, Director Cummings put into the parking study to look at how the barriers are going to affect what we can do with parking revenue in the future. So historically, we've counted on that to fund the Downtown Improvement Committee. And what we have to look at now in the future is that something that we're going to be able to count on? Are we going to be able to somehow rearrange the revenue to get back up to that, 850,000 that we're used to coming in? Or do we have to do something else? And we're going to get those answers via the parking study. So hopefully by 2022, we'll have an idea of where to go for the funding for the Downtown Improvement Committee going forward. And we can reassess the ordinance at that point to decide what the best way is to fund that group and to fund our downtown so that we can keep that going. Do we have to do something different? Do we have to, is it just a matter of, we're going to make up the revenue if we adjust where, for example, zone 1 is? Are we going to do the barriers again? Things like that. So it gives us time. What it does is, one, it gives us time to study those things, but two, make sure that the Downtown Improvement Committee is going to have funds available in the year 2022. Because if we don't do this year, then our next opportunity wouldn't be till 2023. So this is, it's a compromise. The net effect of this is that it's going to take $100,000 away from the general fund. And it's going to put it into the Downtown Improvement Committee. But I think that we can all agree our downtown is a important part of the city that, this Board of Aldermen hope has supported in the past, and the Board of Aldermen in general has made a commitment to our downtown via this fund to, to keep it going and keep it vital. And I think we've done a very good job at that point. So this is the crux of the legislation, and I hope I can answer any questions, and hopefully I can get your support. Thank you.
Any questions on this bill? Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. And thank you, Alderman Clemmons. You've been the cheerleader for the Downtown Improvements Committee from the get-go. So I really appreciate the work that you do on this. And I think this makes sense. It just makes sense. We've made a commitment to the downtown merchants that we were going to do this. And through no fault of anyone's, this happens. And, they shouldn't be left hung out there to dry. I mean, we should still honor our commitment to them as best we can. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? Alderman Liu?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder through you to Alderman Clemmons. I wasn't quite clear on how Section B actually works, the notwithstanding subsection A. If we do fund the 100,000, and if in fact 2022 ends up being a year that parking operations go above and beyond the 775 or whatever that number is, then would we then be paying the excess of parking revenues also?
Alderman Clemmons.
No, we wouldn't. It would be strictly the 100,000. The way that it is written, it would strictly be the 100,000. So, however, I mean, it'd be great if it happened, but I don't think it's going to. It's highly unlikely that we're going to even get to the 660 that we got to this year. It's probably going to be more around the 500,000 mark. If I was a betting man, that's what I'd put my money on.
Any other questions?
Just a follow-up?
Follow up, Alderman Liu?
Do we have attorney to answer that question. Notwithstanding just sounds to me as though both funding measures would continue. Although I recognize Alderman Clemens' expectation that the funding type A will not materialize. But is there an attorney or corporate
We
counsel?
don't have any attorneys with us this evening, but Alderman Clemens, do you talk to the attorneys?
I did, and I spoke to oh my goodness, I'm having a blank.
Celia Leonard?
Attorney Clark. It was Attorney
Dory
Clark.
Clark.
And
Well, you have three of them, Ben.
the notwithstanding is subsection A, meaning that there's a sunset on section B. So in other words, for the calendar year 2021 and the fiscal year 2022, and then that's what the notwithstanding is. So then after fiscal year 2022 and calendar year 2022, it's going to revert back to subsection A, and the B will be stricken from the ordinances. And that's how she described it to me.
Okay, Alderman Clemens, I articulated this in an email just to be certain. This is the question that you were discussing with Attorney Clark.
Well, right, because I wrote the paragraph myself, and Attorney Clark changed it, and that's what she changed it to. So,
thank you.
Director Cummings, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. I just wanted to further clarify the notwithstanding. That is typical legislative parlance. I mean, that is oftentimes something you'll see, a notwithstanding a law or regulation to the contrary, the following will take effect. It is essentially language that you put in that basically says whatever you've done in the past is on hold, because what you're putting forward from that sentence, that line, is what will actually be the legislative action that you're looking to adopt or implement.
Yeah, I think another way to look at this is, before anything up to 758K used to go to the Downtown Improvements Committee. If we made $1 million, they got a couple $100,000. I think this 100 that we're talking about going to the Downtown Improvements Committee, it's probably because of the barriers and everything, it's more appropriate to think of this as it's coming from the 665K, and the city is earning less because we didn't have the downtown parking we anticipated, but we're also meeting our commitment to the Downtown Improvement Committee. So that's one way to look at it. As I said, if we earned $1 million in parking, they would have got a lot more, because right now they get anything above 758 after last year. But I think that, helping the Downtown Improvement Committee, it's another way, we're doing a lot of things to help the Downtown Improvement Committee. This is probably one of the more minor ones. Any other questions or concerns on this legislation anyone would like to bring up? Seeing none, would the clerk please call Alderman Jettie? You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to Director Cummings, through you, if I could, what Alderman Clemens mentioned that the parking revenue last year for the calendar year 2020 was $665,000. What were our expenses? Do you know what our expenses were?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Cummings.
Thank you. Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. I would have to look it up to tell you definitively what our expenses were. Ballpark operations, probably around 300,000. And I'm guessing enforcement was probably somewhere around 300,000. We budget for enforcement, probably somewhere around 400,000, though we didn't spend all of that. So probably somewhere around 600,000 is what our expenses are.
I'm also assuming that there's probably some money saved from a lot of meters you didn't have to collect from and a lot of tickets that you didn't have to write because there was no way to park there.
Yes.
So, okay. Alderman Lou, you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to suggest another way of looking at this. I'm all in favor of supporting our downtown. But I want to point out that I don't agree that unless we do this, we will be not upholding our commitments to the downtown improvement to the downtown. We are, even without this measure, we have an agreement and we will, it doesn't require this measure to comply with our commitments. If we don't make that money, then our commitment is that it doesn't go. Another point I want to just offer for consideration is the Downtown Improvement Committee is currently holds about $275,000. I may be slightly off, but in the last 4 years, their spendings have been $8,000, $50,000 the previous year, $100,000 the previous year, and $33,000 the year before that. So just to consider that, we are, we're living up to the agreements that we made. The question is there some need for them to have additional funds in their, there when we do not have the obligation necessarily? So that's the point I wanted to make.
If in a minute, I'm going to ask if there are no objections. If nobody has any objections, I'd like to hear from one of the members of the Downtown Improvement Committee that's on with us. But in this instance, we had a commitment which we've lived up to every year. If we didn't make the money, they didn't get any. If they made excess money, they got the excess money. So it was in place. But with the COVID and the fact that our restaurants and a lot of the downtown businesses were suffering, we took parking spaces away from them as a city and cut the revenue down. So that it's an issue. So I didn't hear any objections. So Rich or who would like to speak?
I see Mary Lou
Blaisdell.
Yeah, Mary Lou Blaisdell.
Mary Lou?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right now in our account, we have roughly $174,000. And I can provide to you a detailed spreadsheet from 2015 forward of exactly what we spend every single dollar allocated to us on. And it has been in excess of the numbers Alderman Lou just stated. We have paid for, instance, the pay and displays. This year we did lighting. We've paid hundreds of $1,000s in consulting fees for the PAC. We have supported the farmers market for the Great American Downtown. We have allocated money for music festivals downtown. So we have tried to be extreme stewards of the money that has been allocated to us. And it has all gone back down to the benefit of the downtown. And as I said, we keep very close track of our monies. We monthly review the status of what we have in our funds and what we've spent money on. And as I said, we can send each of you a very detailed spreadsheet of how much money has gone out and to where those monies have gone. I think that we've really been conscious of what the money has been spent on. We've been huge proponents of the PAC. We funded the first consulting study for the PAC. We have been behind that from the get-go. So I think that, and the monies that we do get are in excess of 728,000 in account 166. We definitely don't have, as Alderman Clemmons has stated, that for 2020, that number is way below, and we anticipate it will be that same way again next year. All of us downtown are very much in favor of the barriers and of what we have done to try to keep downtown alive during COVID. We realize that if we don't do this for our restaurants, it just impacts every other business downtown. So every single one of us is in favor of that. And we're not asking this for the long haul, we're asking it for the next couple of years. Thank you.
Alderman Lou?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to apologize because I just realized I looked at, I was only looking at 1 month. I was looking at reports that were only based on a single month. So I stand corrected, and thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns on this legislation? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to, since Ms. Blaisdell is here, I noticed when I was looking at the ordinance regarding the Downtown Improvement Committee, there is an ordinance that, the second part of the ordinance, the one part talks about this, about the money, the formula for the funding. But section 320-43.2A says that the Downtown Improvement Committee shall advise the mayor regarding the final, the expenditure of the money that's in this expendable trust fund. And it's to finally be determined by the mayor and the Board of Aldermen through the regular budget process. I don't, is that being followed? When you spend money, do you come back to the Board of Aldermen and get approval for that, for those expenditures?
Yes. We send a memo anytime we have a major expenditure that we're requesting. We send a memo to the mayor stating this is what our committee would like allocated and what it is for. And we follow all the procedures of when you have to go out for an RFP and when you don't. And all of those are followed as set by what the city states we need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions or concerns on this legislation? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries and will be referred to the full board for final approval. Okay, there's no reason to take R20-016 off the table. General discussion. No? Okay. Public comment, is there anybody? Oh, Alderman Wilshire?
Sorry, I wasn't quick enough with the hand. I want to thank the committee for passing this on to the full board. I think the people on that committee do a fabulous job. It's worked well for us having interest from the downtown merchants and making sure that, things are what they should be downtown. I mean, they're the ones that live there. They make it what it is. And I appreciate what they do to support each other, to support the city. I mean, I think it's important to have them, and I think it's important for us to continue to support what they do because it matters. Thank you.
Anyone else? General comments? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an inquiry. I know we got a communication from a director, Marchand, about the reduction in revenue contracts regarding transit, and maybe President Wilshire can help me on this. I thought I saw on tomorrow night's agenda before the full board something regarding this, reducing these contracts. And I'm wondering, were you expecting this committee to review that and make a recommendation, or not?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're asking. What are you talking about specifically?
So Director Marchand sent us a communication saying that because of the transit system has a contract with Riviere and University and Nashua Community College regarding use of the transit system by their students, and it's based upon estimated ridership. And because of COVID, there are fewer students using the transit system, and so she's recommending waiving the fee that they pay for the second half of the year, and then also the Souhegan Valley Transportation Collaborative pays the Nashua Transit System so much per month based upon estimated number of ridership per hours or some formula. And she's also asking that be reduced because of the reduced use. And I think that's coming before the full board tomorrow night. And it's on our agenda tonight as a communication. I didn't know if we were supposed to vet this and make a recommendation to the full board. I hate to be catching you by surprise, Madam President, but
Director Marchand usually reaches out to me if she has something that requires action. And usually if there's something that requires formal action, there's a resolution to go along with it. I think it was more of an RFI or just information to us. But I will touch base with her tomorrow morning and see if she's going to be on the meeting tomorrow night and see if it requires further action from the budget committee. But I think if it did, I think she would have had the proper legislation in place to do that.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like her memo says that there are CARES Act funds that will be used to offset the revenue loss.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know your answer, Alderman Jettie. I apologize.
I'll get an answer and forward everybody on the budget committee with the answer that I get from Director Marchand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Liu, you're on mute. There we go.
Thank you. I had sent an email to Ms. Marchand about this, and I wondered if that is why she mentioned that Ms. Pattison was going to be at this meeting, and I think I heard that she was here, and I wondered if that's why she came, because just thought I'd offer that.
She probably had other commitments, couldn't stay with us. But I'll find out tomorrow. All right, any other general discussions? No? Public comment, is there anyone on from the public that would like to speak about anything regarding the budget committee? Seeing and hearing no one. Remarks by the alderman. Any remarks? I would just like to say that before the meeting, I witnessed the president having a candlelight vigil as we passed the 500,000 deaths from COVID. I just hope everybody takes a minute to remember all the people that have been lost to this disease. And I just want to take the moment to thank the public health and Director Bagley and all of her staff and people that are doing so much to keep the numbers down in Nashua. I think they've done a phenomenal job, sometimes fighting opposition. But I can tell you for a fact, having been there a couple times already, the vaccine site is working amazingly efficiently. And I've even heard people that came down from other parts of New Hampshire to go to get a vaccine here, that it's 10 times better than any other site in the state. So I just want to shout out to Director Bagley and all the people involved in fighting COVID here in Nashua. But I do think it was so sad that we've lost 500,000 people, more than World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined. That's a lot of people. All right, thank you very much. We don't need a non-public. Mr. Alderman O'Brien, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. I would like to motion that we adjourn by roll call.
Motion is to adjourn by roll call. Would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Alderman Clemmons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
the clerk, Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
And we're adjourned at 8:22 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for this evening's meeting.